plant growth and development. Now, what is growth and what is development in relation to plants? Now, generally, growth, it is a physiological process. When we say that generally, what is growth? Growth is increase in size. So, when a plant grows, when an animal grows, so what does it mean? So, we say that, so when we were young, now we have grown up. It means that we have increased in size. So, not only the period, but the actual morphological change what we see in that organism is the size has been increased. So, a plant which was certain height, after a certain period, if you observe that plant, it has been increased in its height or in its number of branches and all that. Similarly, in a human being, so when that he was a child some years ago, now after some years when you observe that person, he will be tall, means he will be grown up. That means his body has been increased in size, either in length also, either in also thickness, means the breadth also will be increased. So, this is in general growth. So, growth, actually how we can define growth? Now, the definition of growth, first, how the growth is defined, that we have to see first. Now, growth, whenever we define, so we have to use certain terms. For example, growth is a permanent irreversible change. This is very important. So, it is a physiological process in every living organism. So, growth, when we say, it is concerned to both the plants, animals or any living organism. So, that is growth is defined as a permanent irreversible change. So, when growth takes place, we say it is increase in size, of course, but that increase in size is permanent irreversible change. So, once the change has occurred in that individual or in that organism, either plant or animal, it is permanent. It cannot be reversed. We cannot make it as usual, or we cannot restore the previous size of the individual. So, now when we are small, now we have become tall. So, we have come to this class. So, when you were in primary, you were of certain height or a certain size of the body. Now you have increased in height, means growth has taken place. Now, this change is permanent. So, it is irreversible. Suppose if you are having any intention to become small, you cannot change your body. So, we may have some desire that I want to be very small and I want to go again to the primary class and so on. But that is not possible, because growth is such a change. It is a physiological change, of course. It is permanent and it is irreversible. This is very important when we define growth. So, growth is a physiological change. It has been increased, but we cannot restore, means we cannot bring back the previous size of the individual. That is what is growth, permanent irreversible change, and it is accompanied in, of course, what we say, it is increase in size and also the dry weight of the organism. That is also important. Now, sometimes the size may increase or may not. But however, the dry weight and the amount of the cytoplasm, protoplasm will increase in that body. The size and the shape may increase or may not increase. It may increase or sometimes it may not increase. That is why once when the change occurs, a physiological change takes place, it is permanent and it is irreversible. So we cannot restore the previous condition of the organism. That is how the process takes place, that is the physiological process or the change in the organism. Then now we are concerned more with plants than with animals. But however, growth takes place in all living organisms. So whether it is an animal, plant or any other organism, so growth is a permanent irreversible change which is accompanied by the increase in the dry weight of the organism, where the size and shape may increase or may not increase. So the increase may be only in certain organs, only a part of the organism or the whole organism. So sometimes the increase may not be occurring in the whole part of the body. It may only occur in only some particular organ or a particular part of the body, that is irreversible permanent change that is occurs in the plant. Now the plant growth particularly is a kind of growth which is called as indeterminate. So indeterminate type of growth, that is plant growth. So that means the growth process is continuous throughout the life of the plant. Growth never stops in plant. Either the rate may be very slow at certain period and it may be very rapid or fast during another period, or sometimes it is very minimum, at a very minimum rate also it may be taking place. So usually in the initial stage, in a lifetime of a plant, the growth is somewhat slow, and after that short period the growth occurs rapidly, and after the maximum growth that takes place, which is called as the exponential growth period, then till its death of the plant or till its end part of the plant, the growth is very slow. So like that the growth may be very slow or it may be very rapid or fast. That is, the growth is indeterminate in plants. Indeterminate means it is continuous, continuously occurring in the plant throughout its life. Then we can differentiate two types of growth in plant. So primary growth and secondary growth. So the growth in general, it is increase in size or the permanent irreversible change. But in plants we can differentiate two types of growth. However, the growth is indeterminate. So indeterminate, that means it is continued throughout the life of the plant at different rates, at different that means levels it will be occurring. Now primary growth and secondary growth are two types of growth which occurs in plants. Primary growth is increase in the height of the plant or the length of the plant. So the stem and the branches increase in size, and that is called as primary growth. So the length of the plant, the height of the plant will increase, and it is the elongation of the plant parallel to its axis, and that is contributed by particular type of meristems which are present in the plant body. So there are actually three types of meristematic tissues in the plant: apical meristem, intercalary meristem, and the lateral meristem. So the apical meristem, which is present at the apex of the stem or even the apex of the root, so it contributes the primary growth. the intercalary meristem, which is present at the base of the internode, almost near the base of the leaf, that is also contributes the primary growth. So in other words, the apical meristem and the intercalary meristem, both of them together will help in the increase in the size of the, that means the length of the plant, or in other words, it brings about primary growth. Primary growth is brought about by apical and intercalary meristems. This is about primary growth. So whenever the plant increases in height, it is primary growth. Now for example, in monocots, there is usually only primary growth. There is no secondary growth. So there is increase in the size of the plant body. Now this secondary growth means it is increase in the width of the plant body, increase in the stem in its thickness. Now this is brought about by the lateral meristem. So the lateral meristem alone will contribute to the secondary growth of the plant, and two meristems like apical meristem and intercalary meristem, they contribute to the primary growth of the plant body. That is how the primary growth and secondary growth can be differentiated. Now secondary growth is absent in monocot plants because there is no lateral meristem in the monocots. So this increase in the thickness, or the what is also called as another word like girth. So usually the thickness of the stem, the width of the stem is referred as the girth of the stem. So secondary growth contributes to the increase in the girth, contributes to the increase of the girth of the stem, and this is brought about by the lateral meristem. In almost all monocots, you don't come across the lateral meristem, so there is no thickening of the stem. The stem remains almost uniform, and there may be slight increase, and that is because of the enlargement of the existing tissues. For example, if you take a coconut plant or even a sugar cane or even a jawar, maize or like that, the stem will remain same when the plant is young, and even when the plant grows tall of several feet or several meters in height, so the stem will never increase in size. So that means there is absence of lateral meristem, and hence there will be no secondary growth in that stem. However, if the stem increases in size, it is not due to the meristematic tissues, it is due to the enlargement of the existing tissues in the stem. So there may be some parenchyma, collenchyma or sclerenchyma. So these tissues, they enlarge, they increase in their volume, they increase in their size, and thus there may be slight increase in the girth of the stem, but it is not due to the contribution of lateral meristem. But however, this increase in the girth is only for a limited extent. So it is not to a large extent, as in case of dicots we can see. So in case of dicot, if you take any dicot plant like a neem tree or any mango tree or a tamarind tree, so when the plant is young, the stem is very small of certain thickness. But as the primary growth takes place, as the stem grows, plant grows, so the stem also will increase in size to a gigantic size, and so that stem we call it as trunk. That means it is due to the lateral meristems which are present in the stem, so that the lateral meristem contributes the secondary growth and increases the girth of the stem. This is what is primary growth and secondary growth. Then there are certain parameters which are used for measuring growth. So whenever we want to measure growth, so in what way, what are the parameters which are used to measure growth? Now for example, increase in the fresh weight of the plant. So if you take a plant and consider its weight, and then after a certain period, again if you consider its weight, so that increase in the fresh weight will give the measurement of growth in that plant. So the parameters used in measuring growth are by taking its increase in the that is the fresh weight of the plant or the organism, and also increase in the dry weight of the organism. So dry weight is the total biomass or the organic matter which is present in the plant, that is also taken into consideration. Even the increase in length of the plant. So if we measure the height of a plant at a certain particular period, suppose if you take a length of a stem today, now after some days or weeks you again measure the length of the stem, you will come to know how much it has been increased in during that period interval. That is also we can use the stem, the length, to measure the growth of the plant. And even the area covered by the plant, the branches which are spread from the plant. So in after a certain period, the branches will grow to a greater length, they further branch, and we can see that the plant appears to be very large in size morphologically. So it almost covers a large area, and also we can measure the growth by how much area it is covering over the soil, and that is also one of the parameter we can use for measuring growth. And even the volume of the plant can be taken into consideration. So all these parameters depend upon which plant we are we are selecting for the measurement of the growth, for measuring the growth. So even volume can also be taken into consideration, especially small plants. So in large plants, the consideration of volume is somewhat practically difficult, but in certain plants which are smaller in size, so we can measure the volume, and thus we can see how much it has been increased by its volume, and we can measure the growth of that plant. Even the number of the cells in the plant can be taken into consideration. In smaller plants, in the number of the cells are taken into consideration, and thus the when we again count the number of the cells after a certain period, we can see the growth by how much number of the cells it has been increased. So that also is one of the parameter which we use to measure the growth. Likewise, these are the parameters where we can use by taking the increase in the fresh weight, increase in the dry weight, and also the length of the plant, and also the area of the plant, and also the volume and the number of the cells are taken into consideration. So in the case of certain organs, we can measure this. If we take the number of the cells in a organ, small organ if you take, and count the number of the cells, so after a certain period when the organ grows and increase in size, the number of cells will increase, and again when we count the number of the cells, we will come to know by how much number of the cells it has been increased in its growth period. So these are the parameters of measuring the growth. Now the next part of the growth is phases of growth. Now what are the different phases of growth which are seen in a particular period? Now growth usually occurs in 3 phases. So there are 3 phases of growth. Now the period of growth which takes place in a plant is usually divided into 3 phases. So these 3 phases are, the one is meristematic phase is one, and elongation phase is the second one, The third one is the maturation phase of that plant. Now, what are these phases and how they occur in a particular period? Now, in a lifetime of a plant, the period of growth is generally divided into three phases: meristematic phase, elongation phase, and maturation phase. So the first step is the meristematic phase. The word itself indicates meristematic. So it is the meristematic tissue which involves in the growth of that plant. Meristematic tissue is having the characteristics of cell division. So plant tissues, they are mainly classified on the basis of cell division. Those tissues which are retaining the capacity of division, that is especially mitosis, so that tissue is called as meristematic tissue. Tissues which have lost the power of cell division and they perform a particular function, they are called as permanent tissues. So here meristematic tissues are involved in growth because they retain the power of cell division. They continuously divide either slowly or rapidly. So this tissue retains the power of cell division and they give rise to new cells in that plant. So that meristematic tissue, it divides by mitosis, and thus there is increase in the protoplasm, and there is number of the cells will be increased. Now the meristematic tissue and permanent tissue, they are differing in certain characteristics. So these meristematic tissues, so any tissue when we observe in a plant, we cannot refer it as meristematic tissue. So meristematic tissues are having varied, they are varying in shape. The shape may be different, they may be rectangular, polygonal, oval shaped, like that. Different shapes of meristematic, the cells in a meristematic tissue is seen. Now the characteristics of this meristematic tissue is the cell wall is thin normally, and the protoplasm is dense. So dense protoplasm, a large conspicuous nucleus is present in each cell. Normally when we speak of a nucleus, the nucleus is normal in size when we compare to the cell size. But exceptionally the meristematic tissue, they are having abnormal large conspicuous nucleus in a cell, and that is the important character of the meristematic tissue. So presence of dense protoplasm and large conspicuous nucleus, and also there are more abundant plasmodesmatal connections. So these are cytoplasmic connections between the neighboring cells, between the adjacent cells through the cell walls, and where there is a kind of communication through these plasmodesmata. So there are numerous plasmodesmatal connections in the meristematic tissue. So when these characters are present, we refer it as meristematic tissues. And also meristematic tissues don't contain vacuoles. As there is dense protoplasm, vacuoles are absent. Then reserve food is also absent. There is no reserve food. Whenever we mention the characters of a cell, we mention about what reserved food is present, either in the form of carbohydrate, protein, fat, oils, or like that. But in meristematic tissue, there is no reserve food material because it is almost utilized in the production of energy for the cell division. Hence, meristematic tissues don't possess the reserve food material. And also the meristematic tissues, they contain chlorophyll, but these chlorophyll are present in plastids which are not mature, they are immature. So these immature plastids, they don't have well developed grana, thylakoids and all that inside them. So such plastids are called as proplastids. So presence of proplastids in the cells is also one of the important characteristics of meristematic tissues. So such meristematic tissues, they involve in mitosis and they give rise to new cells, and that is the first step of the growth. Now the second step involves the daughter cells which are formed. The newly formed cells, they enlarge due to the synthesis of cytoplasm. So there is increased vacuolation in the cells, and also there is enlargement of the cells, increase in the volume of the cell due to the increase in the protoplasm, and thus there is a new cell wall deposition, and that is called as elongation phase. So when a meristematic cell divides to form two daughter cells, now each daughter cell will enlarge to acquire the size of the parental cell, and thus the two daughter cells will resemble the parental cell due to the enlargement, and this is called as elongation phase. The cells elongate, the cells increase in size due to the protoplasm synthesis and cell wall deposition, and also there is increased vacuolation. All these bring about the elongation or the enlargement of the newly formed daughter cells. Then the third step, which is called as a maturation phase. Now these enlarged cells which have been increased in their size or volume, they develop or they differentiate into various kinds of tissues. So all the newly formed cells will not perform only one function. They do not differentiate into a particular type of tissue. So various kinds of tissues, it may be collenchyma, it may be sclerenchyma, it may be xylem or even phloem. So any of the tissues are formed by these elongated or enlarged cells. So when these get differentiated, so that means the cells are said to be matured and they perform a particular function, and hence they are called as permanent tissues. Means they are permanently performing a particular function. Hence that is called as maturation phase. Now as the cells differentiate into various kinds of tissues, hence it is also called as differentiation phase. So maturation phase is the differentiation of the various kinds of tissues, and that is why it is called as differentiation phase. So these daughter cells undergo various structural and physiological differentiation. Now structural means if it becomes collenchyma, there is corner thickening. If it becomes sclerenchyma, there is deposition of the secondary wall, and if it becomes xylem, there will be the formation of xylem elements like tracheids, vessels and so on. And if becomes the phloem, it differentiates or it forms the sieve tubes, companion cells and so on. Like that, the cells undergo structural and physiological differentiation to form various kinds of tissues. Then so these are the three types of growth phases. Now coming to the growth rate. Now what is growth rate? And there are different types of growth rate. So growth rate is defined as the increase in the growth per unit time, and it is expressed mathematically. So increase in growth per unit time means at a particular interval. So what amount of growth has occurred in the first week, in the second week, third week and so on, that is growth rate. So in the initial stage or in the first week of the plant period or the growth, it may be having a certain rate. In the second week, the growth may increase. In the third week, again it may slightly increase. In the fourth week, it may decrease. And again in the fifth, it may again further decrease. Like that, the growth may change, the increase in the growth per unit time. So what amount of growth has been increased, and during that particular interval, and which is expressed mathematically, it is called as growth rate. So the growth rate is defined as the number of the increase in the growth per unit time, and it is expressed mathematically. So we can differentiate two types of growth rate called as arithmetic growth rate and geometric growth rate. Now what is this arithmetic and geometric? So growth rate already we have defined as the increase in growth per unit time and can be expressed mathematically. Now arithmetic and geometric. Now suppose if you take a particular cell, how the cell divides. So the growth always takes place by mitosis, never by meiosis, because meiosis occurs only in the germ cells. Mitosis occurs in vegetative cells, somatic cells. So growth is always brought about by mitosis in any organism, except in some microbes or unicellular organisms, where the mitosis helps in the reproduction of the cells. So here, suppose if this cell divides to form two cells, two daughter cells. Now out of this, only one cell will remain meristematic, and the other cell will not further divide. So this will divide and this will not divide into further production of the new cells. And again, when this cell forms two cells, only one of the cell will further divide and the other cell will not divide. So again, when these two cells are formed, only one cell will divide, the other cell will not divide. So like this, whenever the cell divides to form two daughter cells, only one daughter cell will retain the power of cell division and the other cell will not divide. So when we see this type of division, so there is one cell will not be involving the production of the cells, arithmetic growth, which is called as. So this growth is almost constant, and the increase in the growth occurs in arithmetic progression. So this we call it as arithmetic progression. So after when mitosis takes place, when mitosis completes, only one daughter cell will continue to divide, whereas the other will not take part in the division, it will take part in the differentiation and maturation. So this is a kind of, we can obtain a kind of linear curve. When we draw a graph of this, a linear curve is obtained with the positive value, and the roots which are elongating at a constant rate is an example of this arithmetic growth. So when the roots are increasing, so when the roots are increasing at a constant rate, so that is called as arithmetic growth. Now this cell, so this retains meristematic character. The other daughter cell will lose the meristematic character because it will differentiate, it will mature into a particular type of tissue. So it may become collenchyma, it may become sclerenchyma, or it may become xylem or phloem. So here the one cell of the daughter cells will retain meristematic nature and continue to divide. Even after division, only one will retain, the other will become differentiated into a permanent tissue. That is called as arithmetic type of growth in a plant. Now, what is a geometric growth? Now, this geometric growth is somewhat different. Now, suppose this is the cell. It will divide into two cells. Here, both the cells will go on increasing in the number of the cells like this. So again, these will divide into two. Again, these will divide into two. So the daughter cells will retain the property of cell division, and thus there will be abnormal increase in the number of the cells. Here, one cell will not divide at all out of the two cells. Only one cell will continue to divide, and thus the number of the cells will not increase at a maximum rate when we see in this geometric. In this, what happens, both the daughter cells will involve in the cell division, and the cells, that is the daughter cells, they retain the characteristic of mitosis or this meristematic tissues. They continue to divide, and it occurs in the early embryos. So embryos which are at the early stage, there we can see such kind of cell division, and in the unicellular organisms also we see this type of cell division. So the classical example of this is when bacteria are placed under optimal conditions. So when bacteria are provided with the favorable conditions, so these bacteria they divide by binary fission. So they divided to produce two cells. Again, two cells will produce 4. 4 then produce 8, then 16, 32, 64, so on. So like that the number goes on double at every step. So bacteria will divide for every 20 minutes. So these bacteria, when they are placed under optimal conditions, they divide by this type of division. So that is referred as geometric growth. So in plants we can see such kind of growth in only early embryos, but in other organisms like bacteria we can see in their cell division, and thus geometric growth increases the number of the cells. It makes the cells double in number, and thus there is what is called as the enormous increase in the number of the cells. This is the growth rate. Next, growth curve. Now, what is growth curve? So, growth curve. So, all these are asked for short questions. Define growth. What are the types of growth? Mention the phases of growth. What is growth rate? What are the types of growth rate? So all these are 2 or 3 marks questions. Now growth curve also is a short questions. Now what is growth curve? Now in a taking into consideration the lifetime of a plant. Now suppose this is the seed. So when the seed germinates, it is the birth of the plant. That means the growth starts from that period. So when the seed germinates, there the growth of the plant starts. So when the plant undergoes the death, there the growth is completed. So this germinates and grows into a young plant. Now this growth, this plant will grow further, and it will produce branches and all that, and that is how the growth takes place. This is the usual process. Now when the question is, now since it's birth of the plant, So this birth of the plant means it is a seed germination. When the seed germinates, it means that the plant is born. The birth of the plant has occurred. Now this plant, when it starts its growth, from this time till the death of the plant, now whether the growth is at the same rate, or whether the growth rate is the same, or whether there is any change, whether there is increase in the growth, or whether there is a decrease in the growth, or that is here what is the question which arises. So when we observe the growth rate since from its birth, that is the seed germination, till its death, we see that the growth rate is not uniform. It goes on, there is variation in the growth rate. So if you plot a graph with time against the dry weight of the organism, of the plant. If we plot a graph with the time against the dry weight of the plant, so you can see that the growth shows a curve like this. So these are the period of time. This is either it may be weeks or days. So it may be first week, second week, like this. You go on taking, and this is the dry weight, means it is usually in kgs. So this is the dry weight. So this is the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 and so on. See, the growth starts here up till this period. See, in this period the growth is very little. So by this curve we can differentiate that in the starting, during a certain period the growth is very slow, and further the growth increases at a maximum rate till here. See, this is the growth, and this much growth has occurred here. During this period only little amount of growth has occurred. So during the starting the growth occurred is very little, but after that there is a steep rise of the curve where the growth increases rapidly. So there is rapid growth, and during a short period the growth is very maximum. So growth occurs very maximum during that short period. So during this period the growth is maximum that takes place, and after that the growth is very slow. So it almost remains constant. So this S-shaped curve what we have obtained. So the S-shaped curve which is obtained by plotting a graph of time to dry weight of an organism in its lifetime from starting till end. So this S-shaped curve is called as a growth curve, or it is also called as sigmoid curve. Growth curve or sigmoid curve it is called as. So sigmoid curve is the S-shaped curve which is obtained. It is the representation of the graph. It is a graphic representation of actually the total growth that has occurred in the plant from birth till death, where which is that is the total growth against time. And when the total growth is plotted against time, we get a S-shaped curve, or which is called as a sigmoid curve. So this is present in its natural environment. So we can see this in its natural environment. So naturally when the plant grows, then we can obtain such kind of curve which is a S-shaped curve. Now in this curve we can differentiate three phases again. In the starting there is a slow growth, then there is rapid growth, then till the death there is constant growth. So this part of the curve where there is a slow growth, it is called as the lag phase, and this part of the curve where there is maximum growth, it is called as the exponential phase. This is called as the exponential phase. And at the last, when the growth is constant, it is called as the constant phase, or it is also called as steady phase. Constant phase or steady phase. So this constant phase or steady phase means where the growth is almost constant. There is neither decreasing or increasing. It remains as a constant rate. So initially the growth is very slow, hence it is called as the lag phase. So lag means we refer it as lagging behind. So lag means very slow. He is lagging behind, we usually refer. It is means he is far away, he is back, he is very slow. So that is why it is called as the lag phase. So lag phase means it refers to the slow growth in the initial period. Then the growth increases rapidly. So this growth which increases rapidly, it will occur, there is, or in other words, there is maximum growth during that period. So there is maximum growth in this period. So maximum growth in this short period, there is a large amount of growth. Hence it is called as exponential growth or grand period of growth. Or sometimes it is also called as log phase, lag phase or log phase, or exponential phase, or grand period of growth, during which the plant has experienced, has got maximum amount of growth in it, that is called as a log phase or exponential phase. Then after the exponential phase, the growth reduces and remains constant. Reduces means it does not stop. However, there is growth, but at a very slow rate, but it will remain constant. It will never increase or decrease. So till its death it will remain constant. It is the constant phase of growth. So that is about the one growth curve. Then in the next part we shall come to the conditions for growth or conditions of growth. So here conditions means what are the factors necessary for growth. That is the meaning here. So conditions refer to the factors which are necessary for growth. Now what are the factors which are necessary for growth? So water is necessary, oxygen is necessary, then nutrients are necessary for growth, then the temperature also is necessary. So these are very important for growth. So water, oxygen, nutrients, temperature are very important. There are also other factors which are essential for growth, but these four are very important. Water is essential. When we plant a tree or a plant, a herb or so when we grow a plant, we need watering of that plant. We should provide water to that plant. Water is necessary. Oxygen is also necessary. Though oxygen is released during photosynthesis, but oxygen is necessary for the production of energy during cellular respiration, where we have studied in the respiration chapter. So respiration occurs in all organisms. So in plants also respiration occurs, where energy is produced and used for various metabolic activities. So water, for what it is essential? So if you don't provide water, the plant will fade and the plant will wilt. So the plant will droop downwards and it will fade away, and there will be no further growth in the plant. So this is to maintain the turgidity of the cells. The cell turgidity is maintained by the water, and also the elongation of the cells when they divide, that is in the elongation phase. So there water is necessary. And also for any enzymes, for their action, water medium is necessary. So the aquatic medium, so the water provides a favorable medium for the action of the enzymes. That is why water is essential for the plant growth, to maintain turgidity of the cells, for cell elongation, and also for the enzymes which act in certain reactions. Then oxygen, though oxygen is released during photosynthesis, for respiration it is necessary. So it helps in releasing the metabolic energy, already which we have mentioned in the respiration. So metabolic energy is released by the oxygen, and this energy is essential for the growth activities of the plant. Then the nutrients, so various kinds of nutrients are necessary. So these nutrients, again there are different types, micronutrients and macronutrients. So there are nutrients which are required in small quantities, micronutrients, nutrients which are required at larger concentration, macronutrients. So all these nutrients, whether it is micro or macro, both are necessary for the growth of the plant, because for the synthesis of protoplasm, all nutrients are necessary. So synthesis of protoplasm requires all the nutrients which help for the development of the plant, and also they act as the source of energy for the plant body. That is about the importance of nutrients. Then when we come to the temperature, so temperature of about 28 to 30 degrees centigrade, this is important for growth of the plant. So a temperature of 28 to 30 is optimum, which is required for proper growth of the plants. So this if there is any change in the range of this temperature, any deviation of the range of this temperature will be harmful for the survival of the plant. So that is why optimum temperatures are necessary for the growth of the plant body. So that is about the factors which are necessary for growth. So conditions for growth means the factors which are necessary for the growth of the plant body. So these are the factors which are necessary for the plant body. So that is about certain aspects which are related to the growth of the plant body.